Good afternoon and welcome. I am Rochelle Levan, the Landscape Success Program Chair with Fort Bend County Master Gardeners. Thank you for joining us for the Landscape Success online program. This program was created by the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in Fort Bend County, along with the Fort Bend County Master Gardeners, to help you create and maintain beautiful home landscapes. We've got a great program lined up for you today, using irrigation wisely. All registrants will receive a follow-up email with the recording of the class, as well as all links to any websites or resources our presenter may refer to. A QR code will also be included in the follow-up email, as well as at the end of this presentation. Please be sure to fill out the survey, as we do use the feedback to prepare and improve our future classes. If you have any questions during the class, please enter them in the group chat. Questions will be answered during the presentation when the presenter takes a break. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming our presenter, Fort Bend County Master Gardener, Paul DeBroy. Paul has been a Master Gardener since 2023. He's enjoyed gardening and trying to make things grow in homes he's owned in Connecticut, North Carolina, and McKinney, Texas since 2013 in Fulshire, and in McKinney, Texas. Currently in Fulshire. Paul enjoys growing ornamentals, herbs, container plants, and succulents. He's a big fan of micro-dripped irrigation and an enthusiastic composter. This year, he's trying to grow vegetables for the first time since moving to Texas. Paul is married with 2 recent college graduates. When not participating in Master Gardener activities, he enjoys camping, Texas beaches, saltwater fishing, and visiting Texas state parks. He is currently employed as a vendor compliance manager for Academy Sports and Outdoors. So Paul, the floor is yours.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation, Using Irrigation Wisely. As Rochelle said, I'm Paul DeBroy. I'll be presenting today and hopefully answering all your questions. Before I forget, happy Arbor Day to everybody. If any of you have attended the first class in this series in January, Growing a Great Lawn, you'll remember there was a brief discussion on irrigation, and we'll be expanding that discussion today. I do have to warn everyone, there will be some math later in the presentation. And this is just a reminder that next weekend, on Saturday, May 3rd, the Fort Bend Master Gardeners will be hosting a butterfly celebration at the demonstration gardens here on Band Road, which are near the Fort Bend County Fairgrounds. We hope to see you there. All right, we'll stop briefly here. This is just an updated version of the hydrologic cycle used to show how water is distributed on our planet. As we approach summer here in the Houston area, May begins the start of what we consider the peak irrigation period for residential irrigation. And even though we've had plenty of rain this week, the potential for drought conditions in the future is always high. And this morning I checked some information, and year to date, rainfall in the Houston area this year is 11.68 inches compared to a normal of about 13. A year ago on this day, our rainfall was already at 16 inches. So we're a little behind last year, a little behind normal, and so we'll see how it goes. Now, with that in mind, we as homeowners need to be prepared to do our part by irrigating responsibly. Now, the next 2 slides I took directly from the Texas Water Development Board report from 2022. This report is updated every 5 years. Most recent is 2022. And this just highlights the continued challenges for those of us who live in the Fort Bend County and Texas in general. We'll be providing a link to the interactive version of this report on the PowerPoint, so you can go in and check it yourself. There's a lot of information if you're interested. So the report states that the Texas population is anticipated to increase 73% between 2020 and 2070. Fort Bend County population, as shown in the slide, is expected to double by 2070. And if you look at 2030 in relation to 2020, that by itself is a 24% increase. And between 2020 and 2040, it's a 42% increase. Now, at the same time, projections for water are for water needs to outpace water availability over the next 30 to 40 years. If you look at the chart on this slide, Fort Bend County demand could exceed supplies by as early as 2040, as indicated by the purple bars. This slide here is from Water My Yard, and they state that, over 50% of landscape water is currently wasted due to overwatering, inefficient watering practices, poor maintenance, etc. And by 2070, probably 10% of new water supplies are expected to come from conservation. And that means doing less, using less. So future landscapes must conserve water to be sustainable. And I think the second bullet is very important, that irrigation efficiency should be considered during the landscape design process. I think as they design these master plan communities, if they spend a little bit more time designing efficient irrigation systems, we could save a lot more water. And then the bottom bullet, obviously, landscapes do not waste water. People do. So what are we going to learn today? So by the end of this presentation, we hope to help you understand how to audit, maintain, and repair your system. And that's repairs as in minor repairs. We'll explain how to modify your system for greater conservation and savings. We'll review best management practices and hopefully increase your confidence in maintaining your own system. And I tried to come up with 3 basic points that, three pieces of advice I could give a homeowner regarding their irrigation. And number 1 is water only when needed. 2, apply just enough water. And 3, maintain your system. And from this point on, everything we discuss for the remainder of the presentation can be connected to these 3 points. All right, a little about irrigation efficiency. So water usage during the summer increases between 35 and 70%, primarily due to irrigation. It's estimated that 89% of single-family households have irrigation systems. Now that's a large number, but it also includes people who just have a hose. And then a high percent of homeowners don't fully understand how their irrigation should work. Now, you've probably heard many times that the average homeowner overwaters, not necessarily because they intend to, they just don't know, how often, how long, individual plant requirements, how to set their irrigation controller, and how to maintain their system. Best management practices. Okay, this is important. So the first bullet here was discussed at length in the earlier presentation I mentioned. But just as a rule, if you're going to run your irrigation system, you should run it early in the morning and be completed no later than 10 a.m. Actually, the sun becomes pretty strong after 8 a.m., so 8 a.m. would be my recommended cutoff. If you need to judge water needs for your landscape, do it in the morning before it dries out and shows signs of stress. Water deeply and infrequently. We will repeat this throughout the presentation. Your lawn should only need to be watered once, twice a week. I only water my lawn once a week. Sunday night, system comes on at 1 a.m. I run 4 cycles, 8 minutes each, done by 5. And, regardless of whether we have drought or near drought conditions, that has worked fine for me as long as I've lived in Texas. You want to water slowly for better absorption. Use drip irrigation or soaker hoses where possible in non-turf areas. 1 inch of water will penetrate to a depth of about 6 inches. Use cycle and soak. That's basically what I just described, and we'll discuss that later in the presentation. Try not to water on windy days. This used to say do not, but it's Texas, do your best. And then you should check your irrigation system monthly to make sure it's operating properly. I can't say I check mine every month, but I do it on a regular basis. And most of the time I'm confident I've caught most of the major issues. All right, this is a good quote that can apply to a lot of things, and many of you have probably heard it already. The best fertilizer is the gardener's shadow. Now, this can also apply to irrigation systems as well. And what it means is a little vigilance goes a long way in eliminating or reducing most problems. Okay, next we're going to get into the components of your irrigation system. And these are the main components you'll see in your system. Some of these are visible, some are not. We're going to just start on the bottom right corner here. That is your backflow preventer. And that basically is just a one-way check valve that prevents contaminants from your irrigation system from getting into the water supply. I'm going to guess most towns in the Houston area mandate this for residential irrigation systems. Then we go to the controller that we'll spend a lot of time on our next slide. Controller determines when you're going to water, how long, which zones, etc. Then you have I'm going to put my pointer on here, make sure that works. Please stand by here. Okay, there we go. This is the control valve, and this opens and closes based on your program to direct water into your sprinkler heads. A couple different sprinkler heads here on the top. We have pop-up rotors, and then just pop-up spray sprinklers. Moving on to a roll of commercial grade drip irrigation, and then your different PVC piping and fittings. So this is the controller, and this is the brain of the system. There's many brands, models, many have similar features. We've chosen this one not because we're endorsing the brand, just it's representative of what you might see when you go to purchase a irrigation controller. All right, this particular controller will allow up to 22 zones. That is a large yard. I only have 6 in my yard. So I'm going to just go around the dial here and explain what all these features are. Okay, the red here is off. That's my favorite setting. You should only run your irrigation system to supplement natural rainfall. And so if you don't need water, well, turn it off. The auto setting will basically run your different programs. So if you program your system to come on a certain day for a certain amount of time, you just click it to auto. It'll continually repeat that cycle. The blue buttons are just basic settings. You know, when you first put your plug in your controller, you're going to set the current date and time. And from there, you'll set your start times, how long each zone is going to run, which days each zone is going to run. This particular controller offers additions of different weather sensors, freeze sensor, rain sensor. There's a seasonal adjustment setting. And what that means is you can change the amount of water you're distributing based on the time of the year. So for instance, if 10 minutes was your baseline, that would be 100%. In August, if you wanted to run for 11 minutes, you would change that setting to 110%. And the same thing in the early spring, you know, you're just turning your irrigation system on, you're still getting some rain. Maybe you only want to run it at 90%. So if you want to run it 9 minutes, you change that setting to 90%. This is a flow sensor that can be connected to this particular controller and turned on or off. And then very important for doing auditing of your system, and that's the manual setting. This will allow you to run each zone individually for a few minutes or as long as you want to make sure that all your sprinkler heads are operating, they're spraying water where they should, and working as intended. All right, over here on the right, just different buttons to toggle as you're programming the controller. This link ready button is for this particular controller. You can purchase an add-on module, and this converts the controller to what they call a smart controller, which uses weather data received from local sources to automatically adjust the run times on a daily basis. And then there's a program button here where you can set different programs for when your system goes on and off. All right, very good. And with the link ready function or option for this particular controller, you can control your controller through an app. If you absolutely need another app on your phone, here you go. All right, now we're going to take a quick tour. And after the tour, we'll answer a few questions. So if you were to rip the lawn off your yard, you would see something like this. Now, the only visible parts of your irrigation system would be the tops of your valve boxes, and maybe the actual tips of the sprinkler heads. So we're going to go around here, take a few minutes. Okay, our first stop is the shutoff valve. You may or may not have a shutoff valve in your system. I don't. If you have it, it may be buried in your land, in your planting bed somewhere. If you don't have a dedicated shutoff valve, you can shut off your system from the backflow preventer. Next, you have your valve boxes. This particular valve box has a green square cover. It contains 2 valves. At my house, I have six zones, 6 little round covers, one valve in each one. These are always underground. Let me see. This particular system also has a dead-ended cap for future use. So let's say you wanted to add another zone. You were going to add a dedicated zone for drip irrigation. You already have a means to do that. These are just traditional pop-up spray heads. This piece here that's circled is the solar sync transmitter. This sensor automatically adjusts the controller runtimes based on the local weather data. It helps to reduce usage. It is contingent on a reliable wireless connection. This is just a rotor. Rotors are high input sprinkler heads used for large areas, playgrounds, golf courses, etc. It's shown on a swing arm type connector, which gives you a little bit more flexibility regarding direction, height, etc. And then obviously the controller, we've already talked about that. All right, with that, let's finish this slide, Rochelle, and then we'll see if there's any questions out there. So efficiency by irrigation type. So some of these numbers may be exaggerated, but the most efficient irrigation type is going to be drip. And I note here I have surface and subsurface. Surface drip is what you would typically see in garden beds. You can use it for landscape foundation plantings, raised beds, etc., even pots. Subsurface would be intended for your lawn. Now, honestly, I've never seen a subsurface drip system, but they can be used. Micro drip is just basically it's a smaller version of the traditional commercial drip. Commercial drip tubing is generally a 1/2 inch thick. Your micro drip is 1/4 inch, and it gives you multiple options for whether you use a traditional drip line or additional type of nozzles. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. The multi-stream, which is the center example, are relatively new. They dispense water at a lower rate with heavier droplets. It allows the water more time to sink into the lawn, and they're also highly adjustable. And then traditional sprinkler heads, I would say that is a low number. If your irrigation system is configured correctly and it's maintained, you're probably a little bit more than 50% efficient there. All right, and with that, Rochelle, we'll stop. Any questions so far?
We have one question. Can you convert a system with spray heads to drip?
Yes, and it's a good point. However, if you want to dedicate a individual zone to drip, no issues there. But converting one of your spray heads, you can, and they have sprinklers with built-in reduction valves that allow you to do that. The problem is you're dispensing water at a much greater rate between the two. And you'll see a little farther on, we'll talk about that. A drip system will dispense water like at 1 or 2 gallons an hour, where a pop-up spray will deliver water like 1 and 3 gallons a minute. So if you were going to run your drip, to run that one sprinkler head that's converted to drip and provide enough water for the intended area, you're going to have to run the whole zone and wet everything. And so that's the challenge you face when you try to just convert one sprinkler head within a zone to drip. Now, drip systems, and yeah, we'll get into this. You can run these off a faucet when your faucet's your hose spigot in your yard, and it'll do a great job there. All right, we're going to keep going. All right, hey, what do you know? Drip irrigation. So let's start. Okay, so drip about 90% efficient, and again, good for your entire landscape, including lawn. Micro drip can be used in rows for individual plants and containers. And so looking at the photos above here, starting in the bottom right, this is what I just call, a commercial type drip tubing. This is 1/2 inch. It's arranged in a grid, and it'll distribute water at a uniform rate across your planting area. Depending on the type of soil you have, will determine what the recommended spacing is. So for instance, for clay soil, it might be closer together than if you had a sandy type soil. You just need to follow the manufacturer's instructions. The two top photos show a micro drip system, and they also deliver water with a 1/2 inch, I call it feeder tube, but then you can branch off into these 1/4 inch thick tubing, and you can have either a traditional drip line like is shown here, or there's different types of nozzles that I'll show in the next slide. And I mentioned this can be connected to your hose spigot. This is actually one for my house. And so what you have here is you have your timer, and then there's a wire mesh filter, and then a pressure reducer. And again, I've used this for a few years, very happy with it. Really easy for do-it-yourselfers to put in a micro drip system. I also want to mention, just plain old soaker hoses. It's an inexpensive alternative. I use one for an 8x12 raised bed for vegetables. And so these are the different nozzles, drippers, etc., that are available with micro drip. This would be just a traditional drip line. The spacing can vary between, say, 6, 12, 18 inches. All types of little emitters that you can just plug into the main tubing. The output really varies by what you're trying to accomplish, the size of your plant. And then actually just little miniature sprayers. This is a rotating sprayer similar to the rotating nozzle. It's just at a much lower rate of volume. And it's funny, I heard a presentation recently by a popular gardener on YouTube, and he uses micro drip, and he said he prefers the sprayers versus the drip line just because he can see it. He can see the water coming out, gives him a little bit more peace of mind versus if it's a drip line, which it's trickier to see, especially if you have your bedding covered in mulch. All right, and so we talked about connecting a drip system to your irrigation system, and here's an example in this illustration. You have your irrigation valve as a built-in pressure reducer, and then you also have your mesh screen filter. All right, now next we'll get into how to audit, repair your system. And the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously become familiar with the basic components of the system. You want to learn how to do a manual station run. And then as you're auditing your system, some of the things you want to look for are, first, just, remember I mentioned the gardener shadow, walk around your yard once a day, just take a look at things, gauge the condition of your plants. Looking at your plants in your lawn can really give you a heads up whether you have an irrigation problem. So for instance, if you have a perfectly round dry spot in the middle of your lawn during the middle of the summer, that may indicate that particular pop-up is not working correctly. The same with your planting beds. You have a long bed of ornamentals. Half the bed's looking kind of dry, half the bed's looking good. Okay, same thing. Check the irrigation in those areas. Look to see if anything's obstructing the spray. You might have to trim the branch off a shrub. Misaligned heads where water is going where water should not be. Those are the easiest things to fix. You could have clogged nozzles where the spray pattern, either the riser on the pop-up sprinkler head is not popping up. The pattern is not uniform as it should be. Broken heads and nozzles are pretty obvious. And then you could also have a broken connector under the sprinkler, or in some cases, a crack in your white PVC tubing. And we'll go over some of those here in a minute. So when it comes to repairs, I kind of like look at this like you would call it like a medical procedure. Proceed from least invasive to most invasive, or from easy to more difficult. The easiest things to fix, obviously, are adjusting the direction and distance of the spray on your individual sprinkler heads. Cleaning or replacing the nozzle can be done without removing the entire sprinkler head and digging. If you have to remove the sprinkler head, fairly straightforward. You have to dig, unscrew it, replace it, make sure it's aimed in the right direction, and then occasionally replacing that connector between the bottom of the sprinkler head and your tubing. So tools of the trade. So the tools shown here, these are some tools that will be helpful conducting minor repairs. You don't need all of them. And so what you have here is, these are called riser removers. So these are used if you have to back out a broken connector, whether it's in the sprinkler itself or in the PVC tubing. Screwdriver to adjust the distance or direction on a rotor. The pop-up sprinkler tool, which we'll show here a little later. PVC cutting tool. I use it to really to cut the connectors if I need to lengthen or shorten a connector to lower or raise the sprinkler. I've never had a situation where I've actually had to cut the white PVC, and then utility knife is always handy. So tools in use, okay, screwdriver, pretty obviously, the PVC cutter. This is the riser remover, and then this is a utility knife being used to cut a connector. And then this shows the different components of a sprinkler head if you would unassemble them. So this is your pop-up sprinkler. This is the level that it should be to the soil. The riser is what pops up when your zone is activated. The nozzle is what dispenses the water. The radius adjustment screw is really a distance adjustment screw. And if you were to unassemble the sprinkler head, this is what it looks like. And you notice there is this thing here. This is a filter, and that comes with the nozzles when you buy them. You always want to leave the filter in there because it'll prevent small particles from clogging the nozzle. Some various connectors here on the right. This is a kind of a hinged swing arm type connector. One in the middle is a flexible connector, and then these are the connectors that connect the sprinkler to the PVC piping, and you see it's segmented here, so you can buy these in different lengths and you just cut them to the length you need. The bottom part goes into the elbow or the T, and the top portion goes into the bottom of the inlet section of the sprinkler head itself. When you're replacing a nozzle or a sprinkler head, there's always a symbol on them. There's also regarding the pattern, and you can see in this case here, it's actually on the body of this sprinkler. But when you buy a nozzle by itself, it'll be on the little bag. This shows a 90-degree pattern, 180-degree used. So this is 90-degree, obviously used on a corner, 180-degree bordering a driveway, a walkway, or against your foundation. 360-degree when you have room in the middle of your yard for a sprinkler to just run free. And then they also have a variable. The variable are nice in that it allows a little bit more fine tuning for the direction. And I mentioned adjusting the spray. So the spray direction on the pop-up is controlled by the riser. And if you were to hold that and turn it clockwise and counterclockwise, it'll move in a series of clicks. And you can do this with the sprinkler running. You might want to wear some gloves with rubber tips to get a grip, but you want to hold the cap while you're doing that. If you were to adjust it without holding the cap, you could unscrew it from the bottom connector or over tighten it. And also, when replacing the sprinkler or the nozzle, you want to make sure whatever you're replacing is the same as what was there originally. And most of these components will tell you how long the spray pattern is. And so in this case here, if you had a 15-foot nozzle on your sprinkler, you don't want to replace it with a 12 foot, because you can now cause some uneven coverage within your zones. All right, and this is just the pop-up sprinkler tool, how it works. You insert the tip into the nozzle while it's in the ground, lift up, and then you can clamp the plier part around the base of the riser, and then you can turn your system off, and it'll still allow you to work on it without losing the grip on the riser itself. All right, next we're going to come into just go through some common problems. Now, I'd love to be able to say that I am somewhat immune to these issues, but sadly, everything we look at here, I've probably seen or most of these in my own yards. So the first example here is this is a pop-up sprinkler on a corner, and for whatever reason, it seems to be spraying in 360-degree direction. So the homeowner, the person here, could have put the wrong nozzle on it. It may not be adjusted correctly, etc. Pretty easy to fix though. And the adjustable spray patterns on the nozzles, you basically control by it has a collar under the nozzle that allows you to twist it clockwise or counterclockwise to make those adjustments. The power washed fence, classic. Now, I don't know how long it would take a sprinkler to wash away the stain on a fence, but obviously this has been going on for a long time, and again, very easy to adjust. This is a rotor that is obviously going in the opposite direction of where it's intended. Pop-up rotors, it depends on the rotor. Some can be adjusted by twisting the riser. Others have a set of screws in the top of the rotor to make those adjustments. But by far, direction is the easiest problem to correct in your system. Okay, next, the top example, it could be you have a sunken sprinkler head. So, over time, the sprinkler heads, your lawn settles, the soil settles. What used to be level with the surface of the lawn now could sink a couple inches. So now when it pops up, it's not clearing the grass. That situation, you'd want to remove the sprinkler head, remove the connector, add a connector with a inch or two extension below, whatever you need, reinstall the sprinkler head. You should be good. Now, it could also be you have thatch that's built up over the sprinkler head, let's say during the winter. So try to clear away the thatch and the obstruction. Again, turn it on, see if that'll solve the problem. If not, we keep working our way down. If there's very little water coming out of the sprinkler head, but water seems to be coming up around the body of the sprinkler, it could mean you have the broken body of the sprinkler head itself, or a broken connector beneath it. Bottom example shows this is a rotor, and it appears to be spraying. There's water coming out of it, but you can see there's water pooling up around. So there's some kind of leak underneath the sprinkler head that's causing that issue. All right, geysers of various types. Gotta admit, had one of these last year. Apparently, I ran over the sprinkler head when it didn't retract properly. Again, pretty easy to fix. You really have to just replace the sprinkler head, unless the nozzle for some reason just popped off. When this occurs, though, it's important you react to it quickly, because while this geyser is going, it's also lowering the pressure for all the other sprinklers in that particular zone. And, if you see this happening at your neighbor's house, put a Post-it on their door or something, let them know. I certainly would have liked somebody to make me aware. This example here is a large pop-up sprinkler, probably in a landscape bed. You can see here there's some ornamental grass around it. Maybe it didn't retract, somebody tripped over it, who knows. The example on the right here, it looks like for whatever reason, the entire sprinkler head disassembled and parts were ejected. This example here, you have obviously a rotor directly hitting a tree. Who knows, when this system was put in, maybe that tree was only 1 inch in diameter, and over time it's grown. and now the sprinkler spends a lot of time watering the trunk. Now the rotors are highly adjustable. You should be able to adjust the arc on a rotor to miss the tree in this situation. You may want to check to make sure the sprinklers behind it are covering that area. And if not, you may need to move some sprinkler heads. In this example, I'm not aware of anybody having a problem with excess pressure around here, but you can see what's happened here is the water coming out of the sprinkler head is it's like atomizing as soon as it comes out, and it's just creating a fog that's hanging in the air, and any little puff of breeze is going to move that water somewhere where it wasn't intended to. Now, the only way to handle a pressure problem is to install a pressure reduction valve on your system, and most likely you would want to call a contractor to do that. Backflow preventer freeze damage. Okay, don't let this be you. All right, show of hands in the audience. Who has had this problem? I see a few hands out there. All right. Yeah, if you don't cover and insulate your backflow preventer during the winter and you have a freeze, this can happen. The bottom photo here just shows looks like a cracked bell on top. The top photo shows what can happen when there is damage. The first year I moved into my house in Fulshire, we had a freeze. I came home from work, got out of the car, heard a loud hissing noise, and sure enough, a part had cracked in mine, and we were able to get it fixed. All right, now, easy way to prevent this. So what I do is December 1st, every year, I close both valves on the backflow preventer. I open the bleed screws to drain any water out. I pop this cover on it, and I'm good for the winter. I would advise, if you're going to use something like that, buy it now or buy it in August. You're not going to find one in January when a freeze is predicted. All right, how much is enough? Okay, we're approaching the segment where math is involved, so get ready. So how much water does your turf grass need? These are just general guidelines here. Your lawn may need a little bit more, a little bit less. For Bermuda, again, during peak summer, 1 inch of water is recommended. Same for Zoysia, St. Augustine, a little bit more. And this is a combination of natural rainfall and applied irrigation. And when it comes to running your irrigation system on auto, really 6 months between May and October is the only time you should need regular weekly watering of your lawn. For May, after October, your lawn is not growing vigorously, and it can do very well with less water. Your drip emitters, we were talking about combining drip in one of your normal irrigation zones, and this is what I was trying to emphasize here. You see, the drip emitters will dispense gallons per hour versus gallons per minute. So 1/2 to 2 gallons per hour versus 3 gallons a minute is a huge difference. And so if you were going to try to have both in the same zone, again, something's getting too much water, something's not getting enough. And the actual amounts are going to vary depending on the pressure, manufacturer, maintenance, etc. Okay, determining irrigation rate. Okay, you do not know how much water your irrigation system is applying to your yard unless you measure it. And to do that, you can use what they call a catch can test. Now, there's a couple different ways. You can use, tuna can, cat food cans, or you can buy these dedicated catch can cups that are designed to measure irrigation. The nice thing about these cups is the design and the way they're graduated allows you to measure very small increments very accurately. There's inches on one side, metric on the other, and you can get very precise measurements down to 1/10 of an inch. And the way you do this is you you set out the cups in regular intervals within each zone, run your zone for 5 to 10 minutes, measure, record the results from each of the cups, and then you'll calculate your inches per hour, which we will see here. Okay, so here we go. So I recently did this in my yard, and I was pleasantly surprised. So for the example here, what I did is I basically just cut and pasted the formulas from the Aggie catch can test document, and I applied the actual measurements from the zone, one of my zones. So for this particular zone, I set out 9 different cups, and I ran the zone for 10 minutes, and I recorded the depth of water in each, and that's what you have here. And so I have some coverage issues in this particular zone. We'll talk about those in a minute. So basically, you add up all the measurements, and that came to 2.15. And if you divide that by 9 cups, that's an average of 0.24 inches in 10 minutes. Divide the 0.24 by the number of minutes, and that gives you the amount of water you're applying per minute. 0.024 times 60 minutes. In this, if I ran this zone for an hour, I'd apply 1.44 inches. Now that's a lot. Now, if I convert that to how many minutes I would need to reach an inch, that would be 42. And basically what I did there is, if I know that zone is dispensing at 0.024 a minute, and I divide that into 1, it gives me 42. And so I mentioned earlier, I run my system for 4 cycles for 8 minutes. So I've been underwatering this zone. Now I'll deal with these issues up here, but I'm not going to change. My lawn looks very good with the 4 cycles of 8 minutes. And so I mentioned coverage. So when you conduct this test, it'll highlight some potential coverage issues. And this is the area. So this zone is like the narrow area between my driveway and my neighbor's yard. And it also includes that little strip of side grass between the sidewalk and the road. And that's where some of these were. So I may need to change one of the nozzles for a longer spray distance to cover some of these gaps. All right, now we'll get back to cycle and soak. In the best way I can explain the benefits of this is to consider what happens when you are watering a potted plant or plants in your landscape beds with just hand watering. If you allow the soil to dry out and you go to water the pot or the plant, you notice that the water will pool in the top of the pot or around the plant, and it takes a while for that water to percolate in. And then if you go back a second time, you notice it absorbs fairly quickly. Well, the same situation can occur on your lawn, and that's why cycle and soak is recommended. And I would say the first line here kind of sums it up for me. Deep and frequent watering trains your roots to embed deeper and spread water, making them more drought resistant, creating a healthier plant. And you can see in the illustration here, so if you're watering frequently, but only for a short period of time, the root structure is going to be concentrated in the first 1 or 2 inches of your soil. And so if drought were to occur, you don't have enough roots reaching deep for water. And you see deep and frequent watering will give you that deep, thick root structure, which will allow your lawn to better able to survive the drought conditions. So some more details here. So recommended for clay soils and slopes. You can use this in your lawn area as well as landscape beds. And the way you can do this, you can do it different ways. My controller has a couple different options. The one I do will allow me to run it 4 times, 3 or 4 times, and it spaces out each cycle, just depending on, what you want to do. I space mine out an hour at a time. So I run my zone, the first cycle comes on at 1 a.m., run through 6 cycles. An hour later at 2 a.m., it runs for the second time. And I do this 4 times. You can do it once or twice, 4 times, more than 4 times. Again, it just depends on your individual situation. Newer controllers will allow you to do this fairly easily. Even if you have an older model, but you have the option for multiple programs, you could run multiple programs at different times for different intervals that allow you to still do a cycle and soak. And there's a lot of new technologies available. You can attach different weather sensors to your controllers. On the top here is a rain sensor, which I believe is now required on all irrigation systems in this area. A freeze sensor would be recommended if you live somewhere where you have early or late freezes in the spring or fall. The ET controllers, ET is evapotranspiration. These controllers basically either monitor weather from, let's say, centralized measuring areas, and then they transmit the result through a wireless connection back to your controller and allow you to water based on the current conditions in your area. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, there are a ton of different ET controllers. I'm sure the technology will get better over time. I cannot vouch for the accuracy of these. One thing that's a concern, at least to me, is that, you know, the accuracy and relevance of the information being measured. You know, the rainfall in our area is so variable, you know, even within the same town or county. If you're looking at rain coming through at any given time, you know, if that green dot hits you, you have enough rain for the week. If it doesn't hit you, well, now you're dry. So from these remote monitoring areas, as long as that measurement is relevant to my yard, then I would be more likely to trust the results. And I think I'll add a few more slides to this presentation for this area. Apologize for all the text on this slide. This just describes the differences in the ET controllers regarding the information that's measured. And one tool that's available to all of us is Water My Yard. Hopefully you've heard of that. WaterMyYard.org is run by actually Texas AgriLife, and it was created to allow homeowners to basically, you know, you can download an app for this, or you can go online and you plug in your zip code. It'll tell you whether there's a monitoring station connected to your area. Then you put in your individual irrigation system information. You can put in information for each zone. It'll ask the number of sprinklers, the type of sprinklers. If you know how many gallons is being dispensed per hour, you can enter that. And then you pick a day that you're gonna receive your email for recommendations for the week. So I get mine on Saturday, knowing that I water on Sunday. And I started this last year. I've been fairly happy with it. You still have to use good judgment. You know, I'll give you an example. Last Saturday, I got a recommendation to run my system for 17 minutes, but then I'm looking at the weather forecast and it's like, you know, there's a rain cloud every day next week. So I took a gamble. I didn't water, and sure enough, I had 2 inches of water, 2 inches of rain by Wednesday. So again, always need to use good judgment to override your systems as needed. And then the EPA also has a site called WaterSense, and there's a lot of information on this site regarding water efficiency on products, you know, appliances, you know, faucets in your house, as well as irrigation. And there's a WaterSense, not sure what you call it, but there's like a WaterSense certification that products need to earn to have that designation. And if you go on the site, there's a whole list of controllers that meet this requirement. And so we're getting to the end. Last photo here, reminder, come out to our gardens. And irrigation efficiency matters, spread the word. So any additional questions?
We do not have any questions at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, wait, hold on. I lied. Totally lied. Okay, we have a question. Have you seen fungus problems when watering at 1 a.m.?
Zero. I've been watering the same time for 20 years. I know that is often mentioned. I also only water once a week. So, my system comes on at 1, sun's up by 7. I've never had a problem. But again, I can't speak to everybody.
Secondly, second part to the question is the second question, the Water My Yard service never recommends 2 inches of irrigation in 1 week. I've never seen it suggest over 1 inch, even under extreme drought conditions. What do you think the difference between the 2 inch per week that is always, I mean, that is universally recommended between the Water My Yard 1 inch per week? Any ideas?
No, I really don't. I guess I'd have to go on the site and look. They may just have set 1 inch as the recommended max for all turf types.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's universally known that we pretty much, especially with St. Augustine, 2 inches
Yep.
per week and flowers.
Now, you could certainly take that recommendation and apply a little bit more. And I would say if your St. Augustine's is doing good with 1 inch, leave it alone.
Since we've ended early, Paul, do you mind if we open it up? We can unmute and have people ask you questions. Do you mind doing that for a few minutes?
Go for it.
All right. If anybody has a question, you may unmute and ask Paul a question.
Let me allow people to unmute.
Oh, sorry about that, Susan.
You should be able to unmute now.
Hi, I think I am on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wrote the question in, but I'll ask. So I have the little strip between the sidewalk and the street is quite sloped, and I'm just having a hard time getting it properly watered. Is there with just the usual, I just have the normal irrigation heads. Is there any tricks to that, or just water it more? Maybe cycle and soak more than,
So
more than twice?
are you using cycle and soak right now?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I haven't really started using the irrigation yet, but last year, yeah, I did. But I would do it just 2 cycles.
Yeah, I mean, rather than spend money, I mean, I would try maybe using several shorter cycles
Okay.
and see if that works. Now I wouldn't recommend this, but you could change the nozzle to a rotary nozzle,
Okay.
but the output's going to be a little less. It's going to be less than the other pop-up sprinklers in that area. And the rotary nozzles do dispense water at a lower rate, but it's heavier drops and it's a lower amount, so that you may not have as much runoff. There are also, without knowing the type of spray nozzle on your sprinkler, they do make sprinkler nozzles for those narrow areas. And so it really depends on where the sprinkler is positioned. If it's up against the curb, then your only option really is like the 180-degree arc. If it's in the middle, then there are nozzles that will spread in more of a rectangular pattern, like 2 narrow patterns of water coming out either side.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll look into that. Those
And
are
then
2 good ideas.
And then if in doubt, you can always call a sprinkler contractor, and they may have some recommendations for you. Just be cautious if they tell you have to change everything in your whole system.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, we have our next question from Janice.
Yes, don't most of your fungus problems actually isn't it caused by too much watering?
Potentially, yes.
Most cases, that's what I've seen is too much water creates fungus problems.
Sure. And that's why, and again, that's why we encourage you just, water when needed, use the correct amount.
One more question, Paul. Recommended water controllers? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that. No, as master gardeners, we're unable to endorse any specific brands or products or services. But if you go on any of the consumer rating sites, whether it's Consumer Reports or something like that, they may have some recommendations. You could also go on the individual sites for the manufacturers, and like anything you buy online, there's ratings, and just read some of the comments. There's always crazy comments, but some of them are legitimate, and that might give you an idea of what people think. Also, if you have neighbors or friends who use a particular model or brand and they're happy with it, I'm sure they'd give you some feedback.
Okay, I think that's all of our questions that we have. We do have a survey that we would like for everybody to fill out.
Paul, can you advance
Paul?
to the next slide?
Oh, sorry.
So we would love it if everybody could take a few minutes to fill out our brief survey. We do use the feedback to improve our classes for next year, so we would really appreciate it if you would do that. We also have more classes as part of our Landscape Success program, and I've just set up the link so that you can register for those. And we will also be sending a copy of this recording to everyone who is registered for the class within the next few days. It'll also contain any links that Paul has referenced today in our presentation. And thank you again so much for attending. Thank you, Paul. That was a fabulous presentation and a lot of information, a lot of good information. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
You can stop the recording.